like, I think we need to change our relationship with change. It's not a big scary thing. It's something that we want to embrace and make part of our daily lives. Just like we want to learn and grow ourselves, we want our companies to learn and grow and evolve. And so when we change our perception on it, it's not as scary as we think it is.
Welcome to this Unlocking Change interview with Kathy Keating, a very interesting person who's done everything from being a CTO to being a founder, executive coach. Kathy, you've done a lot out there. Do you want to share with us a little bit of your background? Where did it all start and what sort of roles have you been undertaking?
Yeah, sure. Well, I am a software engineer at heart. I actually have a degree in computer engineering. And I was lucky to have studied artificial intelligence way back when everyone says AI didn't exist, but it did. And I was lucky to have worked in AI for the first several years of my career, building large-scale commercial applications utilizing artificial intelligence. And what was fascinating about that was really tackling a technology that no one had really leveraged for commercial applications before, in spaces it had never been applied. So we actually ended up building an AI platform, fraud platform, detected fraud, and it was in the mobile telecom space. And that product took a large portion of the worldwide mobile telecom market in the fraud space. The product still exists today. It's 30 years old this year. And so it's pretty cool to have built that, the first of its kind, and something really no one knew how to do. And so that kind of set my career. So I've done a lot of firsts in my career, built one of the first content management systems for the internet when the internet first came out. I ran part of engineering for Monster when Monster was bringing jobs online from newspapers, worked for one of the early antivirus companies. And so I tend to follow technology that's new, that's first, that's different. And so it forms my space about how I think about applying technology to real world problems. And so I'm completely comfortable tackling things that have never been done before, tackling hard problems. My second company that I founded was in the health tech space, really taking a radical rethink of how the US healthcare system should be paid for by employers. That company grew pretty quickly and was acquired in 2021. I just want to solve those hard problems that I think really need to be solved in the world. And so it's really informed how I look at the world of tech and being a CTO in the world. I've held a lot of different roles. I've been in tech leadership for more than half my career, and I've been at this career for a very long time. More recently, I spend more of my time teaching people how to be a great CTO rather than doing the CTO role. I think I have a lot of great experience, a lot of wins in my career. And I just want to help CTOs be better CTOs and kind of leave that legacy for the next generation.
I remember the Monster ads back in the .com phase. I might actually insert one of those into this recording. I thought they were fantastic ads that they brought out. And also solving hard problems. US healthcare. You couldn't have picked an easier one?
Oh, yeah, well, if you're going to go big or go home, right?
Absolutely. So in all of that career leading edge stuff, just from, what have been the challenges? What have been the highs? What have been the lows?
So a lot of the companies I've worked for have gone through that rapid growth phase. Interesting, I did the math the other day, and over 90% of the products I've built in my entire career are still in production, which is amazing when you realize I've been at this for a few decades. And so they all went through that rapid growth phase, and I usually came in really early. And I feel like it's about maybe 50, 60, 70 people at the company, a few $1 million, that the whole company starts to grind to a halt. if the company hasn't really put in good operational process. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I see in companies is you're moving so fast and you're cutting corners early in favor of getting traction and not putting really good operational practices into place. And so companies can get really dysfunctional really quickly. I've kind of have a reputation of being able to come in to a highly chaotic situation and turn it around. So one of those turnaround people. And it's all the same. It's all the same challenges. There's not good operational process. People are getting in their own way. People aren't communicating effectively together. And all of that inhibits our ability to actually really do the work that our company's mission is all about. And so I'm not a big proponent of big process, but the right process to be able to make us operationally efficient. And so I do bring that lens about how I do the work that I do when I come into a lot of these chaotic situations. And I think, that rigor and that focus and that cadence of, operating effectively is incredibly important.
So I'm going to dig into that in a minute. Really interesting stuff. And of course, being unlocking change, that's what it's all about, right? Interestingly, in the kind of made up case study in chapter 2, the startup gets to 64 people and suddenly the founder finds herself with 64 direct reports. And now what do I do? But we'll hold that thought, and we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Along the way, have there been what I call any red pill moments from the Matrix? Any people, books, something that's happened that's really crystallized your perspective and sort of said, hey, that's something I'm really interested in?
Yeah, I'm a huge reader. I read books, I don't know, multiple books a week. So there have been some pivotal moments for me. I think about the concept Patrick Lencioni in Five Dysfunctions of a Team talks about the first team concept and understanding that your peers are the most important aspect, the relationship across your peers within an organization, even more so important than the people that work for you, right? If your peers are not operating effectively at every level of the organization, you're going to struggle for success. And we see that is a failure point I see a lot in organizations is people protect their team that works for them to the exclusion of their peers. So that was a pivotal moment for me. The next one, the other one that I think about off the top of my head is Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She's a poker player, a professional poker player, and really understanding what goes into a decision. Decisions are made up of two things, facts and luck. And the question is, how much are you going to rely on luck to make your decision and how much are you going to rely on facts, right? And so poker players take in all the facts of all the cards they've seen and the cards in their hands. But at the end of the day, there is still a factor of luck that goes into every decision. And that has been a profound moment for me to rethink how I make decisions in my world is trying to get as many facts as I can. And then understanding that sometimes I can have all the facts, I can have most of the facts, and I still might fail because that little bit of luck or the part that I really didn't know I couldn't get the facts on influenced the final decision. And that's okay, but don't base your entire decision on luck like a lot of people do in business.
Yeah. So you wrote a blog piece on that actually, which now resonates, which you talked about you have luck up one end and you have all the facts at the other, and you'll be somewhere in between, and then away you go. I actually use poker, World Championship poker, in a different way. I say to folks, I ask them if they watch World Championship poker, and I say, isn't it amazing that the cards you get, you got no control over, but it's the same people always ending up at the last table, right? And so it's not the cards you got so much, but how you play them as well, right? And this is, I used to use this in working in large organizations when people were complaining around why are we doing this or why is this happening? I said, well, they're the cards we got. We got to go work out how to play that. So I like that. I think I actually heard her interviewed on one of the Freakonomics podcasts. So in terms of that, let me go back. I'm going to jump forward a little bit and go back to what you were talking about there, which was Patrick Lencioni. I've got that book and read it as well. In terms of one team, in terms of them not working together that way and protecting their own team. Why do you think that happens?
I think it's what we find is when peers are not working, like in leadership, are not aligned on a common mission of the company. I run into a lot of CEOs in my coaching who are not driving good operational executive strategic process. They don't have good objectives. They aren't, big rocks, quarterly goals, OKRs, whatever it is you want to do. If they're not driving the whole organization to a common objective, what ends up happening is whatever a leadership heard last is the thing they were supposed to do. They go off and they run that process with their own organization. And so you end up with these silos going off in, let's say, 4 or 5 different directions, right? Without unification at the top, right? And so if you don't have the unification at the top, everyone's going in a different direction. And then you end up with these competing where teams or silos are blocking each other. And they tend to protect their own turf rather than realize that the blocker is the problem and the organizations have to work together, right? And I run into this is across the board every time I come into a turnaround session. This is happening. Poor leadership, poor focus at the executive team is driving silos within the organization. And so the fix isn't, Johnny needs to work better with Jamie, marketing and sales need to work better or whatever. The fix is like common alignment at the executive level, and putting a good operations process in place at that level.
So 100% agree. It's what my whole unblocking change is all about. You wrote another blog piece, which was get your OKRs out of my gems.
Yes.
So you want to elaborate on that and how gems, and you can explain what they are, but how that can help create this common alignment.
Yeah, so I run into a lot of people who really don't understand the OKR process. OKRs, I believe it came out of Google, stands for Objectives and Key Results. And one of the challenges I have when I tried to explain OKRs to people who didn't understand it, I kept struggling with a statement I would make that says, yeah, but the OKR process is missing the most important piece, which is the actions that you take, right? And so OKRs is objective and key result, but it doesn't specify how you get there, the actions you take to get there. And to me, the forward action or forward momentum of an organization is the most important piece of what we do to, unlock change within our organization. And yet the framework of OKRs just doesn't address that piece, right? And so what I realized is I needed to rethink the concept of OKRs to include this piece of the actions that we take. So GEMS stands for goals, experiments, and measures. The G, the goal, is the same as the objective. The M is the same as key results. But the experiments or actions that we take is the highlight or the centerpiece of the GEMS framework. And so, yes, we set goals. Yes, we decide how we're going to measure them. But the most important piece and the action that I want my teams to take are, what are you going to do to try to achieve those results or to achieve that goal? Those actions should be where we're spending 80% of our time. And so in the GEMS framework, you actually cascade only down the E, which is the experiments or actions. You cascade that down into your organization, and the whole company is aligned on the same goal and the same measures. but the actions can be different to achieve that goals for every part of the organization. So what GEMS does is it creates alignment at the executive team versus, let's say, in the OKR framework, when they get cascaded down, OKRs change, right? And so you get this drift within an organization that's not beneficial to the organization. So yeah, get your OKRs out of my GEMS, right? Oddly enough, a lot of people in Iceland have implemented GEMS as a framework, and I get questions from them all the time.
There you go. There you go. How do you cascade the experiments?
Okay, so let's say our goal for the company is to increase revenue with enterprise customers by 10%. Okay, so the goal and the measure is 10%. So what does marketing need to do there? What does sales need to do there? What does engineering need to do there? What are the experiments each part of the organization is going to run to increase revenue? So product engineering might build new features, right? That a premium feature. Sales might need to move to solution selling instead of feature selling. Marketing might need to run a new marketing campaign, right? And so each part of the organization has experiments that they're going to run to drive toward that goal. And as each part of the organization creates their experiments, you might find that you don't actually have to build features to increase that revenue. You just need to market or sell differently, right? And so all the parts of the organization should be aligned on the same goal.
Mm-hmm. When I read your blog piece on that, it made me think of Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act. Have you come across that at all?
I've heard of that, yeah, but I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, my original background way back when was engineering, and I worked on the shop floor, and I did my engineering degree, and it was a very old English company. And we didn't change anything. We didn't experiment with anything, right? And along come, I was reading this, and I was reading it actually in Lean Thinking by Womack and Jones. And, the Japanese consultants that came in started moving machines around, and it blew my mind, right? So this doing experiments, or in their case, you plan, you do, you check it, then you act on it, and then you go round the cycle, was a revelation to me. I find in some companies they're scared to experiment, that those silos and those turf wars or top-down management is something that trying to do something new, and you've been living your life at new, right? You've been on the pointy end all the time, right? Have you found that in organizations? They go, oh, this is great, but they really stick to the straight and narrow too much?
Yeah, I think people don't like to fail, right? So as our self-worth is tied up in whether we failed or succeeded. And it makes us feel bad when we fail, right? And so I know for me, having lived on the edge of new thinking, new products that no one had ever built before, like the chances of failure are really high, right? Because we really don't know what you're doing when you're building something new. And so I think over the course of my career, I've just, I no longer feel afraid of failure. I actually want to fail, and I want to fail as quickly as possible with as little risk so that I can learn from it and grow, right? And so I don't see failure as bad as long as I'm learning and growing, right? So when I do most everything that I do, I try to think in small bite-sized chunks, little bit of work, run an experiment, see if it works or doesn't. And that's all part of the overall delivery of what I'm trying to put out in the world. And I just don't see that as failure anymore, right? But I do see in organizations that people are so afraid of failure. And I think a lot of it is because companies try to bite off really big pieces. A good example is companies will run an initiative through product and engineering that's a 3 to 6 month initiative. And you're not going to know till 6 months out that it's going to fail or not. Wouldn't you rather break that up into 6 1-month chunks and put the first month out, see if it worked, put the second month out, learn from it, third. And by the time you get to 6 months, you're actually probably further and you know more than you would have if you had done all that 6 months and then put something out and it was a failure, right? And so I think logically we need to just change our mind to think small bite-sized chunks, low risk, get feedback and continue to go. But as humans, that's not our habitual behavior. So we'd have to have new learned behaviors to be able to put that into action.
So kind of following the agile methodology of sprints, iteration, going forward as opposed to waterfall and hey, here it is. We don't like that.
Yeah. It's like the concept of lean thinking. So you were talking about the manufacturing floor is like, okay, let's try this, see if it works. If it doesn't, let's go to the next thing, right? Be as lean as possible. You're going to get way further. And we can map that out really easily and see, like, if you're doing 6 releases, 6 smaller releases versus 1 big release, you're actually way further ahead at the end of 6 months by doing the lean approach.
Yes, yeah. I'm a big fan of lean. When you talked about OKRs before about, well, how do we do it? It tells us, objectives, what we want to achieve, not how. I feel that way around Six Sigma, where you have the DMAIC process and it tells you got to get to Six Sigma, outside of that and deviations, etc. But it actually, you could still build the wrong process, the wrong system, the wrong solution. Whereas the concepts in lean thinking are, reduce waste, single piece flow, tack time, those sorts of things are actually guidelines on how to do this stuff. So I dragged my management team once through a Toyota factory through a contact. So we went through the Toyota factory and they thought I was mad, but I'm pointing out and boards and this and that and everything else, and so and then we tried to implement some of that within a large organization which had no idea what we were talking about, but that's another story. So you talked about failure. You say that, take risks, but as humans, we don't want to do that. In your journey, have you been in companies that supported you in that? Have you been in companies that didn't support you in that? And how did both of those things feel?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been hired many times for turnaround situations. So in those cases, they really realized that they had failures and needed someone to come in who really looked at how we could systemically turn this around. And I've also been in situations where I came in and then they were happy with some of the change that needed to happen, but once it started highlighting that the leadership needed to rethink how they were being, you all of a sudden became the problem, right? And I see this way too often where we have people in the C-suite who it's okay if everyone else in the org needs to change, but I don't want to have to look at myself. And I think that egotistical approach to it's everyone else but not me is a real problem. And I think the way that we run boards and how the oversight of companies actually allows some of this to happen. For example, we have boards that don't have anyone on them that understand tech, and yet so when tech deviates off track, there's no one to keep that tech person in or the tech team in check, right? And so they're not getting the right advice they need to get back on track. And so I've seen CEOs making really bad decisions and their board's not keeping them in check, right? And so, who's watching out to make sure that even the C-suite, when they need to change, that they're actually humbly taking that feedback and evolving and changing. And I know many CEOs that do change, but I also know many who are like, it's you, not me. And once you start to say it's me, I don't want you here anymore, right? So I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Do you think that's why some C-suites bring in consultants so that they can then move them out if it either doesn't work or it gets too prickly?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting dynamic with consultants that if you're paying for a consultant from the outside, you actually listen to them more than you actually listen to your staff. There's been times I've been brought in as a consultant. I say the same thing as the staff does, and the CEO hears me but doesn't hear the staff, right?
Mhm.
And so maybe sometimes I act as a translator, but I also think it's why we see so many C-suites exited from companies by the new, like they, get a new investment round from private equity or a new VC, and all of a sudden the whole C-suite is out of a job.
Mhm.
And it's because, well, you didn't actually listen to the feedback that you were hearing, and you didn't actually make the hard changes you needed to be able to evolve and grow. And I'm a firm believer in, like, if I didn't learn something today, then it wasn't really a good day. So, and I would hope that, good leaders are really thinking that way about continuously learning and growing.
Yeah. You've recently released the CTO Levels Framework, which I found interesting. So one of the things I talk about in Unlocking Change is about what's called vertical development of people being, and you kind of mentioned it there, a broader perspective, being humble, etc., understanding, hey, I do want to accept other ideas, other views, and then look at how we can work through that. Do you find people out of, the Peter principle, they're out of their depth in terms of they've been promoted up for some reason and maybe for tenure or whatever else, and so now they're struggling with the messages you're trying to give them?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges wrapped up in that kind of is the foundation of why we put the CTO Levels Framework out the door. But first is, a lot of people really don't understand what their job is, right? What is really truly expected of them, and when you get into leadership, right? Jobs are pretty well known in the individual contributor level, but when you get into like VP, C-suite level jobs, it's sort of like, it gets amorphous, right? What's expected of me versus what my job description says. And I also think that the jobs of the C-suite radically change as the company gets larger, right? And so you'll see that in the CTO framework. We have the level 0 through 3 is what we call startup, progressively getting higher. And then the sprint, we call it sprint, is level 4 through 7. And then scale up is level 8 through 10. And the role of the CTO radically changes. Like, in a startup, the CTO is coding. They're really actually a technical lead. They're not a CTO, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the expectations we have of them is they're heads down, they're coding, they're building a product. But then you hit, like, let's say that scale up phase, and all of a sudden now you have to be talking to customers. You have to building compliance programs. You have to be, you have a team of 20 people, and you have to be cultivating their career. And the person who's coding in the startup isn't the person who can cultivate careers in the scale up. So the role of the CTO there is radically changing, right? And then of course you get to the real enterprise level. You're really, how are you interacting with boards? Are you doing acquisitions? These are the things the startup CTO has never done, and is a far gap away from those skill sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so CTO Levels was a way for us to actually define what the CTO does at every level, and then give them a growth path to be able to move as the company moves and grows. And if we're not moving and growing in our roles for where the company needs us to be at that point, that's another reason why we'll eventually get exited, if we're not growing and evolving and changing with those growing, changing needs of the company. So I just think that we need to do a better job across the board, not just with CTOs, but across the board, of helping the C-suite at all levels of a company understand what's expected of them. And if you're not the person who can bring that, that's a great opportunity to bring in advisors or consultants to support the organization, to both train and coach the C-suite person, but also to build that learning into the DNA of the organization as it grows.
Yep.
I've worked at all levels of of level 0 through level 10. So it's pretty interesting. I can like slot in at each level, but I'd say probably most of the CTOs I know have not worked at all the different levels. So don't know all those different blocks.
For people out there listening to this, how could they get engaged or have a look at your CTO Levels framework?
Yeah, they just go to ctolevels.com, follow the links to get to the framework. The framework is open sourced. It's a Notion site. And then we have advisory services that we wrap around it, whether it's coaching or consulting. We also work with CEOs to hire their CTO, make sure that their CTO matches the skill set that they need for the level of company they are. And so it's been great to be able to really keep everyone focused on that, what the role of the CTO really is. So ctolevels.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, to close out, the reason you and I connected in the first place was another blog piece you wrote at a company called Ad Hoc, and it was using team topologies to bring in a change in the engineering department. I think you were hired in as the VP of engineering. Do you want to talk about that? And I'll bring up in the video here a picture, a diagram in your blog there. But tell me about using team topologies and what you found.
Yeah, so I was hired in as a VP of engineering and eventually promoted to run all of technology there. So at the end, I had over 400 people on my team across all different technology functions. But the challenge with Ad Hoc was their consultancy. They're working with the US government on lots of different types of projects. So, whether you engage with one agency, for instance, another, there just wasn't a lot of overlap and there wasn't actually product there. But some of these teams were 4 people and some of them were over 100 people, right? And as a consultancy, it was also a matrixed organization in which there was business account management, which was running the projects, but then there was also technical excellence and wanting everyone to work the same way about how we delivered product so that we could deliver excellently for our clients. And so there was a lot of complexity in the organization. And when I got there, I found that everyone on a project team reported to the account manager. So the scenario that you said where you've got one person with a team of 100 direct reports, like that functionally doesn't work, right? People aren't getting what they need. They aren't getting the direction that they need. And that owner should be running the project, not running the people, right? And so we applied team topologies, which was the concept of team topologies, which has in the book, Team Topologies applies to engineering teams. I took that philosophy and I backed it up, moved it up a level to say, how can we restructure how these teams work and how they understand what their roles and responsibilities are to other parts of the organization. So thinking about, the business, all the different tech functions, product engineering, research, design, how does contracting fit into the process, and what are the ways in which that they support each other from an organization to be able to deliver more effectively. And it was great to help level set everyone to really understand how they work together. And I actually utilized it to add a level of leadership within the organizations, within those project teams, to start to take down the number of direct reports within the organization. And then eventually we rolled out that change across the organization. So I was able to really rework those interface points between all those roles.
And how did it go?
It took a long time. I'd say probably from the moment that I wrote the blog post to when it was put into action was probably close to a year. But, adding new layers of leadership and then reworking organizations and ensuring projects can stay on track and deliver productively. Change can't happen overnight. Change needs to be an iterative, dynamic process that rolls out over time. And we have to allow change to gel before we keep adding more change on top of it, right? And it really took a lot of context setting, a lot of really letting people know why we were making the change, what were the outcomes that we wanted to drive as a result of this. And so it took a lot of that context setting along the way.
Whenever we do these change programs, a lot of people go, "Oh, here we go again," and they decide early whether they're going to buy in or wait out. Let's just wait this out. So what was the feeling in there? What was the acceptance? What was any changes in culture? How did that side of it go?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing we did was we aligned the change to the people that were feeling the most pain, right? So the change was designed to solve their problem. And we really ensured that we measured after the fact that those changes were solving the problems that they were feeling. So like a good example, one thing I did is I put together a leadership, that mid-level new layer of leadership we had added. I put together a session where a recurring session once a month where they could come share with me what's happening, share with me, how we might need to tweak things and get feedback from that. And so the fact that they had my ear and that they could give me feedback on it helped build and retain that trust. And that we are actually over time solving their problem really helped as well. I think sometimes change is just change for the sake of change. And it's not actually solving a problem. I see that a lot. I talked to someone the other day. They've had 4 organizational changes, major organizational changes in a year, because the first 3 didn't work, right? Like, well, there's something wrong with the person suggesting the change, something wrong with the plan, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, very, very interesting. So we're going to wrap up. Thank you very much. Some great stuff in there. Going through it, but before we go, is there any advice or thoughts you want to leave with the people watching this video out there? Anything from being at the bleeding edge through to change, or anything else in between?
I think the thing is, I think the thing I would leave everyone is like change is actually good. If we're not changing, we're stagnant, and make sure the change you're making is going to actually tackle a problem. Make sure you're getting feedback out of that change. Make sure you're taking small bite-sized chunks, be iterative about it. And like, I think we need to change our relationship with change. It's not a big, scary thing. It's something that we want to embrace and make part of our daily lives. Just like we want to learn and grow ourselves, we want our companies to learn and grow and evolve. And so when we change our perception on it, it's not as scary as we think it is.
Right. A line I like to use at the end of my chapters is that if we don't change our direction, we'll end up where we're heading.
Yes. My favorite quote from a movie called Buckaroo Banzai, it's wherever you go, there you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I use that in almost every presentation I do, but like, it's true. Wherever you go, if you're not going anywhere, you're going to end up with exactly what you wanted, right? So just be careful, where you're going.
Excellent. All right, Kathy Keating, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Sharing your experiences and advice out there. Greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.